later on the show. States like Illinois, worried about going bankrupt. Why? Let them go bankrupt. It's better than raising taxes. It's better for the taxpayer. Bankruptcy is an interesting option, and we will debate it. A 67% income tax hike in Illinois. So, is your financially strapped state going to follow suit? That's the risk. Now, I have a new idea. Why don't we just put the states into bankruptcy to help taxpayers? Let them go there, and I'll explain why next up. States are facing a combined budget shortfall of nearly $140 billion next year, and tonight, Illinois has become the first state in the union to turn to tax hikes to close the gap. State lawmakers voted to raise personal income tax 6-7%. Corporate income tax is 45%. It is not a good story. Here's how Illinois Democratic Governor Pat Quinn defended the move today.
We have an emergency, a fiscal emergency. Our state was careening towards bankruptcy and fiscal insolvency. This is a temporary income tax to deal with the immediate fiscal emergency our state faces, to pay the bills so we don't have severe cutbacks in education, health care, public safety. This reform and restraint will lead to more jobs and economic growth in Illinois.
No, it won't. With all due respect to the governor, it's going to lead to fewer jobs. Capital is going to leave the state. They've already been losing population. It's the same old story, tax and tax, spend and spend. So therefore, I put on the table tonight bankruptcy. Bankruptcy. Let's talk about it. We got radio host and Democratic strategist Mark Levine. We got Steve Moore of the Wall Street Journal editorial board, author of Return to Prosperity. Look, Steve, Republicans in the House and Senate in Washington have got to just say no to bailing out the states, and I think they should say yes to amending the bankruptcy laws, so these states, insolvent as Illinois is, can go right in and clean up the mess, particularly the union mess, Steve Moore. Is that on the radar screen?
Yeah, the good news of this story, and I'm from Illinois, so I'm sick about what happened there, as you know, Larry, but the good news is that the Republicans in the House are in no mood for a bailout of California or New Jersey or New York or Illinois. There isn't going to be a federal bailout, and nor should they be. There's no reason that people who live in a state like New Hampshire or Tennessee should have to pay for the fiscal follies of states like Illinois and New York. But here's the interesting thing about this. I mean, in Illinois, the reason they have this crisis, you can pinpoint it to one thing, and it's what you just mentioned, Larry, the out-of-control public employee pensions. This reform package, the one that's going to create all these jobs, it does not do anything. It does not lift a finger to repeal these unbelievably generous $100,000 a year pensions that hundreds of public employees are getting in Illinois.
That's the same old song. That's why I want bankruptcy, Mark Levine, because when I heard Quinn in that clip, we can't cut health, we can't cut education. What he's saying is we are afraid, as a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature, we are afraid to take on the public service government unions. That's what he's saying. So bleed the taxpayers to death, Mark. That's why bankruptcy will work, will it not? You're an attorney. You'd make a great bankruptcy lawyer.
Well, bankruptcy would be a terrible idea. Look, if the federal government defaults, it's a major disaster. If a state government defaults, it's a minor disaster. You know, Larry, that investors, if they found out that Illinois could default on its debt, would require an extra premium, a risk premium, when they lent money to Illinois in the future. And that means future tax revenues go up to taxpayers like Stephen Moore in Illinois for decades. It's a very bad idea. The reason why Illinois is in this mess has got nothing to do with unions. It has to do with the recession. According to the United States Census, more than 30% of state revenues are down, more than 30%, entirely because of the recession. And that's
Mark,
the problem. That's why they need more state aid, not less state aid.
Mark, a lot of states are dealing with this crisis. We met at the Wall Street Journal today with Chris Christie. He's dealing with the crisis without having to take more money out of taxpayers' pockets. You know, on this issue of bankruptcy, Larry, I'm not sure I'm completely with you on this, but it wouldn't be such a bad thing to me if it cost more money for states and localities to borrow money.
Already, look, Illinois, let's be serious.
They have such a low cost of borrowing right now. I'm not so sure that
Illinois has already paid the penalty. They're running 150, 160 basis points against comparable municipal
and they should.
bonds. That has already happened. The bond market is disciplining Illinois. What's not disciplining Illinois is the political process. And that's why, look, we had it, Mark Levine, we did this in New York City in the 1970s. We had an effective bankruptcy proceeding. And you know what? It worked. The power was taken out of the politicians and the unions, and reforms were put into place. Illinois is like a throwback to the 1970s, Mark.
Larry, interest rates will go even higher. There'll be even more basis points if Illinois defaults. Look, I don't support raising taxes in the states. There's a reason why states are raising taxes, and it dates all the way back to February '09 when the Republicans in Congress refused Obama's request to give aid to the states. We all know the federal government can print money, state governments can't, and there's always going to be recession-induced deficits. This is where I agree with Stephen Moore. He wrote in his editorial that the only way out of the deficits is economic growth. And we all know when there's no economic growth,
Mark,
there are massive deficits.
Mark,
these are recession-induced deficits.
Mark, answer me this question. Why should somebody who's watching this show tonight in a state like Tennessee or Texas have to pay more in federal taxes to pay for people who spent too much money in states like California?
Stephen Moore, Texas is in bad shape as Illinois.
Break the unions. The bankruptcy intent is to break the unions, Mark.
That's right.
I'm sorry to break that news to you, but that's the only solution.
It's the only way.
Harm the economy.
I agree with you, Larry.
When you take working people's money, we've talked about this before, Larry, when you take middle-class working people's money and you take it away from them just to give the rich tax breaks, that harms the economy.
Mark Levine and Steve Moore will have you back for a further discussion on the wisdom of state bankruptcy. I'm Larry Kudlow. Thanks for watching.